everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value webinar series. It's a series of educational webinars for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. So we did our first of this series last month with Susan Bryant, principal of the MB Group, a CPA firm here in North Texas. And I'm excited to continue today with John Gorbutt. John is principal at the Gorbutt Group, but he is also the operations and finance master here at Mastery Partners. John and I you like that? I elevated you, John. You're the master. So John and I have worked together for really the last 25 years or so. So if you've always wondered about if you've met me and you know that there must be something more intelligent behind me, if you've been wondering about the brains behind the operation, then John is definitely a component of that. And of course, Kim is the other half of that brain. And so here I am. In fact, John was our guest on our podcast this week. And so if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, it is definitely worth hearing. By the way, if you want to ask questions while we get started here, I encourage that. Feel free to put them into the chat, put them into the public chat, because if you send it to me privately, I won't see it until after the broadcast. But if you put it into the public chat, then Kim will see it, and she does not mind interrupting me one bit. And so she'll interrupt us during the discussion. So, John, why don't we get started? Before we jump into this great discussion today, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been doing finance and operations for the past 40 plus years. And really, most of it I've been focusing on is consulting solutions for companies for going in and looking at business optimization, process improvements, helping them with reporting, doing a lot of due diligence, but spending a lot of time getting into a company and just helping them understand their business and look for issues, which is a lot of what we'll talk about today. But there's a lot there and a lot to be done.
Yeah. So as you can tell on both of our caricatures, that's our better side, right? I mean, it makes us look better than we actually do. So you can just imagine that face over us. And so, John, you had eye surgery recently, but you're still wearing glasses, and that scares me. So that's right. We are calling this session today "Operational Excellence Drives Business Value," and let me set up the T for that just a little bit. 72% of all business owners have no exit strategy whatsoever, and interestingly, 48% of owners who say they want to sell their company today have no exit strategy. That just does not compute in my world. And so it's important to also note that 83% of all attempted transactions in what I call the lower middle market and small market, these are smaller businesses less than 100 million in revenue, never make it to the finish line. 83% of the ones that want to sell don't make it to the finish line. So there's a big disconnect. That's actually a fairly close correlation between 72% have no exit strategy at all and 83% fail. And so that's distressing to me. And we're on a mission to fix that one business at a time. The partners at Mastery Partners, you can see that on the About Us page at Mastery Partners. We've got folks that have participated in over 500 transactions. Now, I personally have done 100 transactions as either the buyer or the seller. John has worked on many more than that, and so I'm excited to have him with us today. My question to you at the beginning, and by the way, if you're just joining us, and I see some folks are, in the chat box, there is a form that you can use to kind of walk through and pick out the most important things to you, or you can just use a legal pad if you want to make notes going along. And so my question to you today is, Do you know the value of your business? Do you understand the value of your business? And if you have had a valuation done, or if you've had an opinion of value, and we do those, by the way, then do you also know the drivers to improve that long-term value? Now, look, if I ask a room of 100 business owners, what's the value of their business? Most of them will be able to provide an answer, but the question is it an accurate answer? Is it really what the business might be able to drive on the open market if it was for sale, or if it was sold to an ESOP, or to a third party, or to an insider, family, friends, that kind of thing? Do you really understand the value of your business? That's one of the highest issues when it comes to selling businesses, that business owners don't have a genuinely realistic view of what their business is worth on the open market. It's always worth more to them than otherwise. And so today we're really going to be covering some things in your business that we think you should be doing in order to improve the business and maximize the outcome on the business. So while we do this, if you've downloaded the form in the chat, or you can do this on a legal pad, what I want you to do is kind of make notes on the things that you want to do here, because I'm going to challenge you at the end, as we always do on our live events and on our webinars, to pick out the 3 most important actionable things that you can start doing right now in your business. And so I'm going to challenge you at the end. So be making notes. Today, we're really going to talk about, last month we talked about finance, and John has massive amount of experience in finance. So we might touch on a couple of financial things today as well, but we're really going to focus on KPIs, operational issues, and the dreaded due diligence. Hopefully you may have seen my blog post yesterday on that. So, by the way, the numbers that you'll see on this screen, this comes from a much larger presentation that we do. We've got a program that we run for an hour and a half, either as a private program for trade associations, for businesses, things like that. And so these numbers correlate to the actual number of one of the things that we would identify in there. So you'll see it jump all around. That's intentional. And if there are opportunities to speak in front of a group, then we'd be happy to talk about that. We also do the whole thing, the Maximize Business Value program, as a half-day workshop where business owners can really do a deeper dive and get involved in their business, if that's something that might be interesting to you. So KPIs, I think, let's jump right into the deep end here. I think one of the most important things that every business should do is establish great KPIs, or you can call them metrics, or whatever. I think of metrics, I always call them metrics. I think of metrics as the vital signs of any great business. If the metrics are properly designed, then they can provide clues to challenges in the business that can be addressed before they become raging fires. So John, how do you use KPIs in your businesses?
Yeah, I agree, Tom. I mean, the KPIs they identify issues along the way. They help keep you on track. I mean, you can go in and set up KPIs. They're going to vary by business, but you can set up key KPIs, say around DSO. So you keep an eye on your AR. You can set up.
All right. You better stop using the acronyms. What's DSO?
Day sales outstanding. So you can set up a KPI there to keep track on how's your AR looking. Is it growing too much as far as days? I recently worked for a client, and we had KPIs set up around employee turnover, because they had a large workforce, 500 people, and they tended to turn people a lot. And so that was something to measure, because you invest a lot of time in training, startup with people, the hiring process. So keeping an eye on whether or not your workforce is staying static or if it's constantly changing. You can set up KPIs around material costs, overtime. And so it's really getting in and looking at your business, figuring out what key things make movement in your business and can really impact your business, and setting up KPIs to measure those and set up goals for those KPIs to be. and say, okay, I need to be under this. And so you can start monitoring to see if you start creeping up.
Yeah.
You
And
know what
so,
you do.
so when you use these in businesses, what you're looking for, I guess, is variances, right? Either up or down on something that should maybe either be steady or growing in the right direction. So you use those to go and find those examples. Am I stating that properly?
Yes, exactly. Because those are going to identify, okay, say my overtime, and I know I only want it to stay at a certain percentage. It starts climbing. Well, you can look at that and understand, well, am I getting the value for that and recognize that what it's going up? Or am I just shifting and now I'm spending more overtime to produce the same thing? But at least the KPI tells you, hey, my overtime percentage is growing and I need to take a look at that.
Yeah, that's so. So why don't you? You've talked about a few of these. Why don't you give a couple of examples of KPIs that maybe we have folks of different types of businesses here, but maybe give some examples of KPIs that would work in almost any business.
In almost any business, you really are trying to look at your inventory. How long is there, if you've got inventory, again, business, but what's your inventory look like as far as inventory turns? How quickly is your inventory turning over? So you measure your inventory, again, measuring your sales, how long they're outstanding, um, going in and measuring, simpler things is just measuring gross profit. um, is a KPI in itself. It's usually not talked about as a KPI, but measuring your gross profit and especially that gross profit products, and start just getting metrics set up and understanding that all of a sudden those change. Why did they change? And I think that's the key of looking at them and understanding the impacts of them.
Oh yeah, gross profit's a great one, right? Because if you're watching that and you've really kind of established a reasonable history, and you know that you're running at, I've run businesses that had a 30% gross margin. I've run businesses that had, even much smaller than that, but businesses that had even an 80% gross margin. But suddenly, when you see something either spike with a higher margin or dip with a lower margin, you got to scratch your head and go, gosh, I wonder what changed there. If you're not measuring the KPI and you're not tracking that, then you might just say, oh gosh, we were much more profitable, or we were not as profitable last month, and it doesn't mean anything. But you can see that if you're using gross profit. I love that as one of the KPIs that you should be watching. What
Hey
about
Tom. Hey Tom.
yes,
How
yes.
often do you recommend businesses change KPIs, and do you keep them for 1 quarter or what?
Oh, awesome. So John, you wanna start in on that, and I'll give my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I
Well,
think,
this is the way it works, by the way, folks. John gives the facts, and then I give opinions.
yeah. From a KPI, I mean, once you've set one up, and I don't necessarily see, even if it's not changing, it's good. It's something you keep track of. It's something that you don't have to spend a lot of time on every month. Now, I think you're going to set those up and you're going to look at them I look at them on a minimum of a monthly basis and trend those KPIs to see how they're doing. Um, if your business model changes, or new products come in or something, you might address and have to change to new KPIs. But more than likely, the ones you set up, if they're done right, are going to be the ones you're going to continue to track. And if they're not changing, that's great. You don't have to spend any time. It's a quick look. Okay, I'm on track. Good. Move on to something will be changing. It happens every
Right.
day. Beauty of business. So then you can focus your time on the ones that are volatile or
Yeah,
doing.
there are certain things that probably aren't going to change, right? Day sales outstanding or AP, your accounts payable days, things like that are not going to change. But you bring up a great point. Anytime that there's a significant change in the business, you should have a look at the KPIs and make sure. So you pick up a new product line, or you change direction from. In one of our businesses, we went from selling products and services to going a complete SaaS model, a recurring revenue payment, on a monthly basis, that required us to go through a whole new shift. We had a paradigm shift on our KPIs because now we're not looking specifically at margin on hardware that we're selling. We're looking at metrics around our growth and our monthly recurring revenue, and so super important that if you have a significant change in the business, you ought to examine that. How frequently do you say, John, that you should be looking at these, what I call, vital signs or metrics?
At a minimum, I want to look at them on a monthly basis. And a real key around KPIs is figuring out a way to set up and capture the data easily.
Mm.
You don't want to spend days capturing data and capturing so much data you can't go through it. So you need to figure out a system, a process, set something up that, have somebody come in and establish, okay, here's the data we're going to pull. We can dump it into this format. We can get these results quick. Because the key is getting the results quick, looking at them, and then taking action.
Yeah. Geez, if it takes you a whole day to gather the data on that, then that's really killing productivity, right? So
Right.
you're right. I hadn't thought about that. That you've got to set up systems so that you can very quickly see those KPIs. Do you think you've talked about different KPIs? Do you think that you should establish KPIs even as granular as by department?
I think by department, by functional area, I think all of them should have some KPI measurement within them. Now, whether or not you need 20 KPIs across one, no. But each one needs something to help you kind of identify and keep them on track, and make sure that you're measuring and looking at that department or that functional area, be it HR or be it operations. But I do think you need them by functional area, by department.
I like that. And, at my last business that I sold 2.5 years ago, which you sat on the board of for a number of years,
Yes.
we were relentless monitors of the KPIs. And now in our business, we were a fairly complex business. We had 3 different divisions in the business that were selling in different marketplaces. So 3 operating units, and inside those we had departments. We were measuring and monitoring something to the magnitude of 200 plus KPIs on a weekly basis. Now, that didn't mean that we brought all 200 of those back to the management team. We had a dozen KPIs that we were watching every Monday in our management meeting, that we were looking at these specific KPIs. And if something was out of whack, there was be a KPI for each department. And if something suddenly got out of whack, John, I'm getting feedback on your computer for some reason, but it sounds like ET is trying to phone home. But if something was out of whack in that one KPI that we chose as kind of the most important KPI, that would allow us to go dive deeper into KPIs in other departments and see what might be going on. So I agree with having KPIs established kind of in every department so that you can measure and monitor those. And what happened then is that each department kind of had, a dozen or 15 KPIs that they were monitoring, and they would bring them one most important one to the top. Now, you also mentioned, and I want to be sure that this doesn't get missed. We really could have done a whole webinar on how to establish KPIs. And we might do that in the future. We're spending a lot of time on it here because it's so very important. As I say, it's probably one of the most important things that you can do in your business. So you talked about, it's one thing to measure and monitor those, but you also said you got to have a goal. What do you think about, so you might be measuring this at X, but if you don't have a goal, then all you're doing is monitoring the number, right? How do you use goals to make those changes?
Well, see, and you brought up a good point by the large number of KPIs, but setting up KPIs, that's a way to monitor your different departments and their individual performance, and for that department manager to know what's going on in his department. So at a whole, at a CEO level, as a huge management team level, small management team level, whatever it might be, you don't have to be looking at all of those. You're going to pick up the ones that are your yellow lights, your red lights, the ones that are starting to trend wrong, the ones that have heavily trended wrong, and look at those as a team. But having these at the lower levels will allow management to monitor and measure the various departments and their productivity and efficiencies. So I think that's key to have them at that level. And then you've got to establish goals as far as how these KPIs impact you. What gross profit level do you want to run at? Establish a number for how many days you want your payables to be at, and what kind of terms you want, how fast you want to turn your inventory. There might be a reason why your inventory turns slow. And so your KPI for your business might be different than somebody else's. And you've got to go in and assess that and make sure it's right, but then establish goals for each of those areas.
So what we did, go back to my example of my last company. We were a software development company, and we were also a reseller of our own products. And so what we did to set goals, we established the 10 or 12 things that we were looking at a team management level. And in order to set goals for that, we looked at what those KPIs were, but then we went and investigated what is best in class in our industry. So let me give you a great example. One of the metrics that we measured every week was support revenue against cost, or professional services revenue against cost. That's an easier one to talk about. So professional services, we were selling software and implementing it, and it was the cost to actually go out and implement that. What the best in class of software companies that do what we do, not just the average, not just a benchmark here. I'm talking about, we established the best in class as our goal. That was our target to get to. And so best in class had a 2-to-1 ratio. $2 in revenue for every $1 in cost. And when we established that as a metric, we actually had a 0.5 to 1. So 0.5 to 1. So we got 50 cents for every dollar we spent on implementing our services. That is a formula for disaster, right? So if we sold $1 million in professional services and it cost us $2 million to deliver, that's a problem. And so we wouldn't know that if we weren't measuring all the way down to that granular level. And so, we establish it first. And by the way, when we're so far underwater like that, getting 50 cents for every dollar we spend, our first objective was, let's just get it to break even. We know what best in class is. It's 2-to-1, but that is a giant leap from where we are today. And so how do we get it to break even? And it was a combination of how we priced our products and how we costed or how we lowered our cost. And so we were able to move closer and closer to that break even. And once you hit that, then you can talk about how you can get further beyond. But of course, there's also market conditions and can you, the easy way to fix it is, geez, if I'm only getting 50 cents for every dollar I spend, just double our price. Well, if you double the price, that prices you out of the market. And so you got to find it's really art and science to how you get there. And that's a great example of how we,
and that's a good example to show that without going down to a more granular level, if you're just looking at a high level, your gross profit as a company might be great, but you're losing someplace and that you need to fix. And overall, you think you're good, but you're just doing extremely good over here and really bad over here, or leveling out, but without going into the granular and setting up the metrics by various revenue types, by various departments, you really don't get to see that. And you could be making money in spite of yourself.
Yeah, right. And you don't even sometimes realize, we recently had a discussion with a prospective client that, they were making so much money in one line of their business that they just weren't paying any attention, right? I mean, they let that business basically fund the rest of the business. But when you really pull back the layers of the onion and you get a little bit deeper in, you realize that this other business, which is almost half of their cost base, right, is basically losing almost as much money as this business over here is making. And so then you get faced with those really challenging decisions, which we help with at Mastery Partners. Is the easy answer is shut off this business and let this one keep going, and you will double or triple or increase your profitability exponentially. But if you're not measuring those things, you don't know, right, where to look. And so you've got to get as granular as you can. Well, let's move on to the next point here, and that is pull the weeds. I think every business owner should really back up and take about a 50,000 foot look at their business at least once a quarter to identify where the weeds are, because then they can put together a plan to systematically remove the weeds from his garden, right? So of course the weeds are what I call weeds are those lingering problem areas that might be found anywhere in the business. They could be an issue in the warehouse or in sales or in finance or wherever. But if you do this on a quarterly basis, then the weeds don't have an opportunity to grow out of control and you can eliminate them from the organization. So I know that we've got my good friend Michael Vizentine on here as well. He is an EOS implementer. My personal opinion is that every business owner in America should read Gino Wickman's book, Traction, because it gives you a way to identify those weeds and start pulling those weeds out on a quarterly basis. That is the entrepreneurial operating system, and I'm a huge fan of that, but that's a story for another day. We've done a couple of blog posts on that and we've also done some podcasts on that, but there's a plug for that, an unexpurgated plug. So Michael, I know you're on, and so that's a huge benefit. You should do that. But John, what do you think about taking that quarterly view and really zeroing in on where the weeds are?
Yeah, I think that's extremely important because most owners of businesses, they're just totally invested in the daily grind. Things are changing, especially in this environment we live in today, where there's so much change and so much impact, and people get all caught up in that, and they don't get a chance to step back until suddenly they're firefighting, and they're spending every day fighting the latest fire. And that's where the KPIs become very key in that they'll help you identify where some of those weeds are at. But stepping back, taking a look at those KPIs and address issues ahead of time can save you a lot of time, save your business a lot of money. I spend a lot of time in my consulting solutions stuff doing triage on businesses, going in, assessing, what's bleeding, how do we fix the bleeding? So let's put a plan in place to fix the bleeding, get it stopped. Now let's execute, make sure everything's fine, that there isn't something else. Because a lot of times you go in and you see one issue, but if you don't dive in and execute and do something with it, you won't notice that there's maybe an underlying cause that you missed. And so like you said earlier, peeling back that onion, and you find, oh, there's one more blemish. Okay, now I've got it all. So I'm really big on going in, assessing it, putting a plan in place to fix it, executing on that plan, and then assessing to make sure that you've got things under control. But if you don't take that time to step back and look, you're just a firefighter, which is a great hurt. We need tons of them, but you don't fighting fires in your business every day.
No, and that's just the real key. And that's why I love EOS so much. It causes you to step back and you take that quarterly view and your annual view, and you can see where those challenges are, and you should be addressing those. But there's lots of resources out there for that. But I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. But if you haven't read the book Traction, Gino Wickman's book, then I invite you to go do that. That should be required. You can even drop off now if you're going to go buy that book and do that. I'm only kidding. So let's jump into a couple of what I call kind of our rapid fire points. I don't want to spend a lot of time on inventory because perhaps some of our viewers and listeners today don't have a ton of inventory, but what do you think about doing monthly and random inventory cycle counts, and why is that important?
Yeah, I think it's a key to not getting your costs out of alignment, because your inventory, understanding what's there from a finished good, from a raw good, from a finished good, if you don't have good, accurate inventory, you can promise something to a customer and not be able to deliver. Even from a raw material standpoint, you have the same problem. And those cycle counts, they're key to do, and the monthly inventory is a very key thing to do. But if people aren't, you got to do a proper cutoff to capture your data. You've got to go in and then analyze it immediately, and then post and make those changes and update. I get into businesses where their cutoffs are terrible, so then they're making changes to inventory. It's still wrong. People get frustrated and don't believe the inventory, so then people start doing extra counting and keeping their own worksheets, and there's just a ton of wasted time. If you just went in and you did a monthly inventory, you did a proper cutoff, analyze it right away, figure out why it's off, fix it. Then you got confidence in your inventory, and your people start having confidence in your inventory, from salespeople to your operational people.
Yeah, inventory counts is so important. I cringe every time a business owner tells me, and this is a fairly frequent occurrence, that how do you do your inventories? Or because that's one of the things that we assess when we're working with business owners. How accurate is your inventory? Oh, that's what I use to kind of fudge it at the end of the year. Oh God, I'll give you a great example of why inventory is so important. And this is out of our deep, dark past, John. You remember when we were working together in Chicago on that business that had some, let's call it, challenges. This was 25 years ago, right? And so we actually had a problem in our inventory that was, and hear me clearly, a $1 million swing in profitability. We had an inventory problem that caused a $1 million swing in profitability. And it's because we had the business had really very poor inventory management. And man, that's not somewhere so inventory, I'd say that was the one thing. Maybe up until that moment, I thought, inventory, whatever. That's when I became a believer.
So, impacts in inventory typically drop straight to the bottom line.
Yes, they do.
You don't want those surprises.
No, you do not want surprises. So I don't want to spend much time on this, but documenting processes, if there was something really super important in operations and throughout the organization, it is documenting processes. If you don't do anything else after this, if it's establish good KPIs and document your processes, then you're going a long way toward it. But we did a podcast, and we've had a great blog post on documenting processes and why you should do that. But from an operational standpoint, John, since you are our operations master, what do you think about whether or not documenting processes improves business value?
Oh, definitely there's an improvement in the fact of, with documenting processes, it allows you to much easier, however I want to say that, help and cross-train people. We talked a little bit about this on a podcast we did, was that in today's environment, with COVID and people having to suddenly be out and not work, if your process is documented, somebody else can pick that process up and go in and do that other person's job. But if you don't have any documentation and it all lies in one person's head that's on that job, and suddenly they're not available, the business is impacted. So taking just the time to just a simple documentation, a lot of times it's going through and doing screenshots. I've done this for a lot of clients and saying, okay, you got to go through these screenshots because somebody new doesn't know what steps to go through in the computer. They got the general idea of what maybe an AP clerk does, but how do they do it? They don't understand. So
yeah, there could be, literally in any business, there could be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of processes. And I'm not necessarily talking about documenting all of them, although we have an easy methodology that helps people do that. But you got to identify the critical ones and know. I know without going into a lot of detail, John, you stepped into kind of those sometimes the interim CFO role when a client has suddenly found themselves without a CFO for one reason or another, and you've walked in where there were no processes documented. And how hard is that?
It is extremely painful, and the business takes a hit for a little while because you've got to just go in and start looking at how did this go out? What happened? And all of a sudden, and usually you learn by fire because somebody calls and says, "Hey, I didn't get a check," or "I haven't got this information." The bank calls and says, "Where's my reporting at?" "Oh, I didn't know we did reporting." And I don't have any kind of process how to produce it. Show me what we did last. So you can catch up, but it takes a lot of hours of time whereby, I'll go into a lot of those businesses, and when I leave and transition, I leave a, CFO for Dummies process document that says, if you just go through and do all these things, the business will be fine.
Wait a minute. Even I could come in behind you and be the CFO?
Well, I might have to add a couple more chapters, but
okay. Awesome.
So do you think there are like 8 to 12 core processes for all businesses, or is it really dependent on the business?
I think it might depend on the business, and John, I value your opinion here on this as well. But anywhere that there is cash, anywhere that there is money in your business, you need to document that. One of the first things I ask, particularly for small businesses, is what's your cash handling process and cash checks, all of that kind of thing. And so that needs to be documented. Who is opening the mail? Who is filling out the deposit slips? Who is making the actual deposit? Because you can get really, really, really out of control in that department. And John, I'll spare you the pain of us going through our example in the Midwest when we found that out the hard way. So that's a good one. I think sales process always needs to be documented very well. I think most of your finance processes need to be documented. You want to chime in on anything, John?
I would say every business I go into, the first thing I do is look at cash and secure the cash. So how's my cash coming in? How's it going out? Banking. I mean, that's the first thing I look at. And like you said, then from the sales side, how am I getting invoicing out? How is that being taken care of to make sure that I've got billing going out to bring me the cash back in that I need? And so getting those two things immediately under control, and then start documenting, processes around and close and how to get deeper and make sure that's all accurate. So I think it's probably cash, then going into invoicing, and then your financials, a month-end close process so you can capture all your reporting. If you get those three things well documented, you're ahead of most people.
Yeah, you're moving down the path. So in the interest of time here, we'll keep rolling. I think also that many companies don't do a lot of forecasting, and you can build a process around forecasting as well. I think a well-run business should, at a minimum, be looking at a rolling 13-week forecast. So what is that, and why is that valuable, John?
Well, it's valuable to understand, do you have sales coming in to support the level of people that you have on payroll? Do you have, are your costs going to be coming in? Sometimes people have to buy items in bulk. Are you going to have the cash available to do that? If not, then you might, be able to tap your loan. And if you're not going to have that, well, then I got to replan and figure out how can I produce to meet the cash flow needs that I have. So understanding the next 13 weeks of cost, sales, cash that's coming in the door is key to make sure that you do meet all your goals and that you do deliver your product and get everybody paid.
Boy, capacity is so very important, right? I mean, if you're forecasting what's coming in, and then you understand the capacity of your departments to be able to deliver the product, so very important. We worked with a client that that actually had to tell the salespeople to stop selling within 30 days of starting the new year because they were already pre-booked for the next 18 months. And that's because they let their sales outstrip their capacity, and they were in manufacturing. So it wasn't an easy problem to solve. But if you know that and you're doing kind of that forecasting, you know if you can deliver this or if you can't deliver it, and what the time frame is. So very important. I also think, although I didn't put it here, I think one of the most important things is really that cash forecasting. I'm a huge fan of forecasting cash out as far as you possibly can. In my last business, we were forecasting 36 months on a monthly basis. We could roll it into a report that showed it on a quarterly basis. But the reason for that is because I knew I had big lumpy payments coming for acquisitions that we were doing. And I could see how that was going to impact my cash as much as 24 months in advance. And so the last thing in the world you want, if you're not cash forecasting, the date may be upon you that you've got a lumpy payment of some kind that you're not prepared to make, and then you're scrambling to either go find funds to be able to do that through traditional sources, or do a capital call in order to be able to fulfill your obligations. So I think having a great cash forecasting is so very important to operation, and I'll end it there. By the way, we do have a simple tool if you're interested in, if you're not doing cash forecasting now, we've got a simple tool that you can use to do that. So let's move on to some of the other things. We did say we're going to talk a little bit about financial stuff, and we have today. And in the interest of time here, I think this is a biggie. If your financial statements are not easy to understand, then you should think about restructuring them. That doesn't mean starting over. There are people that can help you, and no matter what software you use. But I think a great litmus test would be to take your financial statement to your banker who is lending you money, basically, and saying, do you understand these? Does this all make sense to you? Or if they start asking questions and it doesn't make sense, then that's an easy way, or an easy signal to say, maybe I need to restructure these. Or if you have a great friend who's another business owner, share your financials with them and say, do these make sense to you? Because look, if we get into the daily operation, if we're stirring the sauce every day and we look at these financial statements, they might be easy to read to us, but your financial statements need to be easy to read by third parties so that you can raise funds and or perhaps you've got a board, or perhaps you've got bankers that are looking at those, or some external folks. You want financial statements that are easy to read, and if they're not, it's worth investing in the time to do that. You want to weigh in on that, John?
Yeah, I think having someone else, like you said, a fellow business owner that you talk with in your industry, whatever it is, take a look at them, because a lot of times you might look at your financials and go, yeah, I understand what's over there, but they don't tell the story. And when you need those financials to be able to tell a story because you need additional funding or you decide to exit, you want to have things in place, historically in place, that tell that story, and that you don't have to interpret for people to be able to read. So I think that's very important. And
I love that. I hadn't really thought about
using somebody, another business.
Yeah, I love that. I hadn't really thought about that. Your financials tell a story, and if you're looking at a financial statement that is extremely confusing, the story that it tells is that they don't really know what's going on in their business, right? And that's an unfortunate story. You don't want that story to be told, right?
Telling a story, that owner is so key. They can't leave.
Yeah,
Don't be telling that story.
Yeah, if the owner can't step away for a vacation, then that's important. In fact, that is a perfect segue into just a point that I wanted to make here. One of the most important things, by the way, you see these numbers on here. If you joined us late, these numbers are related to a much larger presentation that we do, and we pulled some of the components out of that. So this would have been number 43 out of 56 or something like that. So the numbers you saw, that was intentionally done that way. If you would like to have us do the much longer, more in-depth presentation or workshop, then you can reach out to me afterward. But I think one of the biggest things, especially for small businesses, and now we're talking about businesses less than 10 million in revenue, If the business owner is not expendable, meaning if the business is dependent on the owner to be there and run the business, then it is, in my opinion, the small businesses might be worthless, right? I mean, if something happens to the owner, I always ask this question. When we engage with new clients, and we can tell instantly that the business is dependent on the owner. I always ask, so what happens if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? And it starts to get them to reflect on, oh man, maybe I do need to think about this. I just recorded before this podcast that comes out next Monday with Dean Ash, our sales master at Mastery Partner Sales. He's a sales consultant, awesome guy. But he said that a business owner should really focus on building a team to be able to pull himself back from the business. And I really like that visual, that's so very important. So invest in the right people, invest in the right systems, and make sure that the business is not dependent on the business owner. So John, you want to weigh in on that real quick before we move on?
I have to agree. We look at so many businesses when we talk to somebody and say, well, what is your role? And their role is what keeps the business afloat. And you need to be vital. And obviously you need to be fully engaged, and it is your baby and you want to make sure it's taken care of, but it can't be totally dependent on you to survive if you ever want to get out of the business.
Yes. You can't get out of it.
If you're going to be there till the last day.
All right, we've only got a few more minutes here, so I want to jump into this. I wrote a blog post yesterday, the last one that really isn't in our presentation, but it's prepare for due diligence like your business depends on it, because it does. So I wrote a blog post yesterday about this one, the dreaded due diligence. It can be a dumpster fire unless you're prepared for it. So if you've been through a business transaction, then you know what due diligence is. If you haven't, then you need to hear more about this and perk up here. So the normal deal process would look something like this, pluses or minuses, but it has these general tones. The seller or an investment banker or a business broker will provide a little bit of information about the business. That's called the teaser. Interested parties in the teaser sign a non-disclosure, and then they get a more detailed view of the company, including some financial information. That's commonly referred to as the deck, or the CIM, C-I-M, Confidential Information Memorandum. After reviewing the CIM, the buyer makes an offer to purchase, subject to due diligence, which is what's called a letter of intent. And after negotiations, of course, subject to due diligence, after negotiations on the terms of the LOI, you move into the due diligence phase. So John, you've done more due diligence than anyone else I know on the planet. Typically buy-side due diligence. You did a lot of due diligence even for me personally through the years. So what is due diligence?
Due diligence, I would say it's kind of like a colonoscopy, but it's really a deep dive into a business. It's going back, it's going in and looking at every aspect of the business and whether or not it's true the way it's stated, whether or not there are any issues underlying. I look at things and say, okay, you got to go in and just take a business apart. And so it becomes, people get offended when you're doing due diligence because you're questioning why they did things, why their business ran this way. And, they shouldn't be offended. You're just trying to understand, because every business has its own nuances, but you've got to go in with due diligence and look at every detail in a business and understand it and validate it, because now it's going to be yours, And as acquiring a company, depending upon the type of acquisition, you're taking on a lot of their previous sins, known and unknown. And that's the real key. The known things are easy to find. It's the unknowns that might be lingering, that might come out to bite you later as a buyer, that due diligence has to bring to the surface.
Yeah, it is a necessary component of it. Now, I don't make a lot of friends when I say this in the buyer community, but having been a buyer many times, I understand. So I want to jump out on a limb and say it, that Due diligence, while yes, you need to verify that the numbers are the way they are and the business operates the way that it was represented, but it is designed to reduce the purchase price. That is my personal opinion on that. It's to look for things that weren't disclosed that give a buyer an opportunity to reduce the purchase price after it's been negotiated. Now, we could argue that one way or the other, but it's not the only purpose of it. But a lot of times that is the outcome of it. And if you want more on that, you can go look at the blog post that I wrote yesterday. How long does due diligence take, John?
There's typically due diligence can take 30 days to can take 120 days. What really drives the due diligence is the availability of data, and the availability of data is strictly driven off of whether or not the owners have taken a look at their business. Do they have all their business pieces in line? Do they have things available? Have they historically looked at their KPIs? Have things we've talked about earlier? If a lot of those things are in place, processes are documented, due diligence can go pretty quickly. And then if it slows down, it's because the buyer's slowing it down. But 9 out of 10 times on due diligence I was doing, that what slowed it down was I could always outrun the person that I was doing the work on. They could not provide me with enough data fast enough. And so I was always waiting on them. And then, what slowed the process down is, since they'd never taken a look at any of this before, then I would start asking questions, and they'd have to spend more time researching because they weren't ready for the question. They didn't have an answer. And like you said, that gave the opportunity to go, well, this is probably a reason I might have to reduce price because this is an unknown.
Yep. That's a very frequent outcome. And so it could take 30 days, it could take 120 days. The bigger the business, the more detailed it is. But it's typically it starts with 175 or 200 questions.
Yep.
And I mean, you can expect it to be that volume. The faster you can respond, I think the better due diligence goes. Too many times they get drug out into 6 or 8 or 12 months because the seller can't produce the information. And do you agree that it goes better if you can produce it faster?
Oh, much better. I mean, if you can produce the data faster, then you're ready. Typically, you're going to be ready for the questions. When I would go into due diligence, I'm looking for legal concerns right away, all the legal structures to be in place. And then, is the business repeatable? Is it just one-time anomaly? So if you can be ready to answer those questions ahead of time, then the business is going to go fast, the due diligence will go fast, and there's less chance of you getting an impact and more of a chance of you getting the value that you truly have in the business because you know your business better. Many times I'd finish due diligence and an owner would say, you know more about my business than I did. I'm like, true, because I dug so deep and now we're both at the same level. It's not something that as an owner you need to know every day, but you need to have the data available.
Oh gosh, yeah. Gosh, yes. So the good news is that we can help with that, can't we, John?
Exactly.
We can help prepare a business, and when you go through our process, which I'll talk more about that in just a few minutes, we can help you get ready for that. So I'm afraid we're almost out of time here. If you want to connect with John, then you can do that right on our About Us page at Mastery Partners. I think Kim has put a link in the chat. And so you can, that'll be a link. One of the things I do when I'm on a call like this, if they're putting links and things like that, I just click on them. It opens a new window, and that way you can go back to it afterward if you want to do that. So now we're at the action item stuff. I promised you at the beginning. I want you to, while we talk through and maybe answer if there are any, Kim, are there any questions, any additional questions? So while I walk through what we do, why don't you take a few minutes and think about what is the one most important thing or 2 or 3 most important things that you can take action on in your business that you learned here today. So do that on the form we gave you, or you can do it on a worksheet. Just a moment about what we do. Our business is to help your business transition on your terms. That's what we do. We believe that every business in America will eventually transition. That's just a fact of life. Unfortunately, 83% of businesses fail to reach the finish line when they attempt a transition. So we help business owners define the ultimate exit strategy and execute a plan to transition their business on their terms. We do it through a 4-step process that is our own process. We're not using somebody else's. We've developed these 4 steps ourselves through the years and the vast experience we have in business transitions. It all starts with what we call the TRA, or Transition Readiness Assessment. We assess your business at how ready it is to transition today or tomorrow. When we do that, you think due diligence is crazy? We ask 500 questions at different places in your business. We examine the business from every angle, and we tell you how ready it is to transition as if it would happen tomorrow, because that gives us clues on things that need to be improved. With that, we give you a free opinion of enterprise value. We tell you what we think your business is worth. Step 2 is what we call the roadmap for value acceleration. We take all the information that we've learned about where your business is today and what it's worth, and then we go into a discovery phase where we talk about what is the ideal desired outcome. Because then if we know where you want to be and we know where you are, we can build a bridge to get you there. And that's what that roadmap for value acceleration looks like. Think of it as a Gantt chart, and it helps you do the things in the proper order that you need to do to prepare your business. Sometimes those are 12 months or 18 months or more commonly 30 or 36 months to really prepare your business. Then it's all about execution. We've told you what you need to do. You can either go out and execute that on your own, or you can engage with us. We become your project manager and your accountability partner, and we provide you with the tools that you need in order to be able to go out and execute the strategy. If you partner with us, you can do it yourself or go out and do it with us in that regard. And then you're ready to transition your business on your terms. So wouldn't it be better if you own a business to transition the business on your terms rather than have terms thrust upon you? Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that my book is on sale right now, Maximize Business Value. It is on sale until the 30th, which gives you about a week. We discounted it a third off because our book was selected by the Exit Planning Institute as one of the books that they highlighted this year. We're so excited about that. That was a virtual conference a couple of weeks ago. Be sure you can get it on Amazon. I think Kim's given you a link in our chat if you want to go get that. It's on sale, normally $14.97, on sale now for $9.97. We would love to have you read that and tell us your thoughts. And of course, listen to our podcast. Comes out every Monday. The podcast this past Monday was with John Gorbutt, and we talked about a whole bunch of other things on that podcast. So if you want to hear more of the brains behind the beauty, then you should go listen to our podcast. It's Maximize Business Value Podcast. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts, and find our channel there and download it. And we love for you to do that. So next month, I hope that you'll join us again. This will be a monthly series. Next month, we will focus on another topic, perhaps sales or legal or financial areas and things that you can do to improve the value of your business. I hope that you will make this a normal part of your monthly routine. And of course, you can schedule a call with me. If you'd like to have a one-on-one consultation, doesn't cost you anything, just a few minutes of your time. I'd be happy to talk with you about your business. You can do that right on our website, or I think Kim has probably put something in the chat. So really appreciate you joining us today. Kim, were there any more questions that we needed to address? So thanks for coming. This is, of course, the Maximize Business Value webinar series, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in your business. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to build operational excellence so that you can maximize your business value. Thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate you coming today.